Well, hello there everyone, my name is Amy, this is the Opinionated Woman, and welcome back to Crafty Reads, the series where we craft and I talk about the last 5 books that I've read. This time we are yet again working on this cardigan. Since the last time I filmed the Crafty Reads, I took a break on this cardigan. Hugo, can you not collect the cat's toys while I'm filming, my love? Hi! Hi! Mwah! So I took a break because I made a little pouch for my mom for her Instax camera. So right now I've done these halves and I'm just going to be weaving in ends while I talk to you, because you've got to make weaving in ends interesting, because if you crochet or knit, you know how it is. You know how it is. Also, if you hear any wailing in the background, the wind is wild today, like absolutely wild. So like my pot plants, I'm like worried for their safety. Like I might bring some of them in, like Jesus Christ. But yeah, let's get into it. I almost completely forgot that I hadn't spoken about The Vanishing Half by Bennett. This is my philodendron. It's coming to visit us today. I always love editing when there's a plant in the video, like it just adds a little pop of color that I really enjoy, and this background is looking so much better now, so it's like so I finished The Vanishing Half by Bennett right after my last video. Yeah, I think I finished it like a couple of days after my last book. So I thought that I'd spoken about it, but I haven't, and I'm glad that I get to now, because Vanishing Half is a book that has been talked about relentlessly online. Like, it was a booktube darling. I haven't been able to get hold of it because I haven't really had the funds, but then when I went for my birthday book haul, I splurged and I got one and I got to read it, and I was so happy. Like, I read this in the dog park and it was an absolutely elite experience, let me tell you. So The Vanishing Half follows 2 sisters, they're twins, called Desiree and Stella, and they live in this town in the south that's like, it's a black town, but everyone there is very pale. They're very, very white passing. Like, this book focuses on colorism a lot, and I think it's really nuanced in the way that it discusses it. And really complex at the same time. So Desiree and Stella come from this town where everybody marries light on purpose so that they can keep, being as white passing as possible. And some circumstances happen that separate these twins, and they go off in 2 different directions. Desiree goes off to marry a black man and to live as the black woman that she is, and Stella goes off and marries a white man and pretends to be white. And I mean, that premise alone, I was like, this book is going to be fucking intense, and it delivered on absolutely every aspect that I wanted it to, and then some, because we didn't just follow Desiree and her sister, we also followed their daughters. So a girl who thinks she's white and a very dark-skinned black girl with a very light-skinned mother. And the way that they converge, and it shows the different ways that they could, like 2 different convergences of how you could live your life, but at the same time Stella is not living as a white woman, living as a white woman. She's a black woman living as a white woman, so her anxieties are very high, because at any point she's thinking she could be discovered, and it really like opens the books to talk about internalized racism in a very effective manner. And it was just written so beautifully. Like, I'm so psyched to read more from this author. Like, I've only heard of The Mothers, which I'm definitely picking up. But yeah, Bennett, what a fucking writer. So good. And then I read a book called The Disappearing Act by Steadman. And let me tell you, when I read this on my list, I could not for that. I was like, what is that book about? I've only listened to 1 short audiobook since then, and it went out my brain. So that tells you what I thought about this book. So I never read Caroline Steadman before. I decided to give her a go, carry on looking for more thriller authors, which is what I like to do. And so this one came up. And I was like, okay, cool. And like, let me tell you how forgettable this is. I could not for the life of me remember the main character's name. So our main character is an actress in England, and she's just been in this big series, and then she goes through a breakup where her actor boyfriend leaves her, and she's doing really well professionally, so her agent sends her to LA to audition for a bunch of roles, and talk with agents and stuff like that. So off she goes. And at an audition, she meets this girl called Emily. And Emily runs off to do her audition and leaves our main character with her wallet and her car keys, which is very strange because she was like, oh, go like pay the meter for me or something. And then our main character can't find her. So she then has to go on this sort of quest to get this information back to this woman, and some weird things happen that make her believe that something dodgy might be going on. And I can't really tell you too much else besides that, otherwise I would spoil it. But to be honest, like, I liked the writing. Like, the writing kept me reading. I just wish the revelations and the twists were as good. I just don't think... It's not like they were even terrible twists. It's just that they weren't delivered in a very effective manner. I don't know whether it's the audiobook narrator. I don't know whether it's just the way that the scene is written. But like, all of the twists fell flat for me. So yeah, maybe I'll give her one more go. Like, give her a chance. Maybe one of her other books will be less dull, because this one did feel very dull. And yeah, I just didn't want to waste my time, but I like wanted to give it a go, like I didn't hate it. It was just lackluster. Then I read a fucking weird one, and that's Lote by Shola von Reinhold. This book is from a small press called 20 in 2020, Black Writers, British Voices. Oh, it smells so good. This was from a small press that I couldn't get hold of in South Africa. I had it on my TBR because of Matthew Sharapa, I think. He always recommends wonderful, weird books. And my sibling was in a gay bookshop in Edinburgh, and they found this for me. So I was super psyched to get into it, and they suggested, like, why don't you read Lote when you're done with the next book? And I was like, okay, cool, that's what I'll do. If you like dark academia, but you want it queerer and blacker, this is your book. Like, in the best fucking ways. Like, it was like, dark academia is so surrounded by comphet a lot of the time, and there's never anybody with any fucking melanin. This takes it to a different level. If you liked books like Catherine House, which is also another one written by a black author, and Vida Nostra, which is another one that was recommended by Matthew Sharapa, so this checks out as a recommendation. If you like that kind of weird dark academia, where you're like, I have no idea what these people are studying, like, not even an inkling. Like, they talk about it and they're so obtuse on purpose and use like lingo so that the reader doesn't actually understand what these people are studying. And that's the thing that I found very, very similar with Vida Nostra and Catherine House. Sorry, had to check the camera, got paranoid. Sometimes that happens. I'm like happily chatting about a book, and I'm like, what if it's not filming? Because my freaking worst nightmare is refilming a freaking video. Anyway, not like I don't have any time in the world because my fucking clients are not getting back to me. It's just like an ongoing issue of the freelancer. Clients are not getting fucking back to you. Anyway, so this book follows, what is her name? Matilda, that is her name. Who is a black girl who gets these transfictions, which are like special interests, like topics that she's really passionate about, that she gets really obsessed with. And one of those topics, her current transfiction, is the Bright Young Things, which is a group of queer people in the 50s who used to be very full of like pageantry. They used to go dressed up to parties in different themes, and like wear costumes and drink and be merry and do drugs and stuff like that. And while the bright young things were real, and a lot of the people that she talked about in here were real people, the character, the member of the bright young things that Matilda is most obsessed with is Hermia Druitt, who is a fictional character that this author made up. And she is a black queer woman who is in this high society, and she's breaking the barriers when it comes to what's allowed in social circles, being a woman, being queer, and being black. And Matilda's transfictions with Hermia bring her to this place called the Residency. Called this residency in a place called Dunn. And she's not even sure what this residency is for. She just applies for it. She gets in, and she ends up going to this place, and she gets embroiled in this weird and wonderful place that Hermia had been in, studying something called thought art, which is never completely described. It's always just talked about in a very academic way, but it's never described like fully. And I just thought that the academic setting, but the fact that she barely participates in academia at all, she's very much on her own travels, and the way that she navigates that place, navigates the strange people that are studying with her, it was very interesting, very weird, and full of interesting, layered, queer black characters, which, yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to read, but it was so strange. So if you like Vita Nostra, you like Catherine House, try out Lote. And then, because it took me a long time to finish Lote, because it is a chunkster, and it's like not, it's not that chunky. It's like 450 pages. It's not a chunkster. But I was reading it at the same time as a book that I'm currently reading at the moment, which is Biography of Cancer. So it's a bit of a heavy going one. So I decided next issue of Scott Pilgrim was in the works. So I read Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness. This is number 3 in the Scott Pilgrim series, so I can't really tell you what it's about because it'll spoil things. But if you don't know, Scott Pilgrim, the Scott Pilgrim series follows Scott Pilgrim, who fell in love with this girl called Ramona Flowers, and in order to be with her, he has to defeat her 7 evil exes. And it's kind of got superhero-y vibes, like video game vibes. Like, they're not just like normal human sort of interactions. They're normal human interactions until they have a fight, and then they'll be like, level up, new life, stuff like that. If that makes any fucking sense. But yeah, in this book, he carries on his quest to defeat the 7 evil exes, and it was a good old time. Though I must say, sometimes, especially because this is in black and white, I sometimes mix up characters slightly, because, like, especially the women are drawn quite similarly when it comes to, like, haircuts and stuff like that. So sometimes I get the characters mixed up, but I don't know if that's just me. And then lastly, I listened to Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Jesus Christ, this book. I again had been recommended this like so many times, and I wasn't even familiar with the fact that Michelle Zauner is the singer in Japanese Breakfast. So I listened to their latest album before listening to this book, but actually this book had nothing to do with her career or anything like that. It mentioned it in passing. This is about her mother and her mother getting cancer, and them going through her treatment, and then her mother dying, and then the utter grief afterwards. Like, I was not prepared for how downright depressing this book was, because so just as a warning, if you're going through something, luckily I had a family member in the hospital recently, so if I read this a couple of weeks ago, I would not have been able to read it. But that family member had a miraculous recovery somehow, which is great. But yeah, if you're feeling a little bit sensitive, do not read Crying in H Mart. Leave it until you're feeling a little bit better, because it's really fucking sad. It looks at the complexities of the relationship between her and her mother, and how it's not always a perfect relationship. It wasn't always smooth going. And then it looks at their relationship and how much Michelle participated in her mother's treatment. She was there all the time. And then they also have a very interesting look at the fact that her and her dad didn't have as much of a developed relationship, and they're sort of like looking at each other being like, yeah, we didn't picture this happening. We pictured burying you, not burying mom, you know? Like, it was very, very hectic, very intense and sad. And then but one of the other things that's beautiful about this book, besides the beautiful way that it talks about grief, beautiful and like, it hits you in your heart. This is the best way to get me to weave in ends. I've just weaved in like all of these ends, no bother, because I'm just chatting. This is great. What a wonderful time. The descriptions of food, because she's Korean. So H Mart is a Korean supermarket. So she's crying in the supermarket aisles because all of the food is reminding her of her mother that she's lost. And the descriptions of food throughout this book are so great. Oh my gosh, stuff is being blown around my yard because it's so windy. Goodness gracious. Yeah, wonderful food descriptions. Very sad, full of grief. Just absolutely wonderful. And I've done my ends. Huzzah! Thank you for sitting with me while I did that. That was very effective. Yeah. Did you read any of these books? What are you thinking? Like, let me know. My next Crafty reads we'll have to see, because June is Pride Month. So not next week, while you're watching this, on Thursday is when everyone is posting, or mostly everyone is posting their TBR for the Queerlit Readathon, which is happening the whole of June. So my video will be going up on Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Central African time, for everything that I'm going to be reading in June, and the bingo board and everything like that. If you want to check out anything for the Queerlit Readathon, Queerlit on all platforms. And yeah, hopefully you'll be participating too. But other than that, like, comment, subscribe, all of that fun stuff, and I'll check you next time.